I know.
I was told, 1,600 guests, 600 media.
So
that just seems like a lot.
So the way the event was held, basically there was a press conference show the night before at a kind of a warehouse. And yesterday the press conference was held at this location called Showpalast, right next to the Allianz Stadium where the FC Bayern Munich soccer football. This is one of the venues. I hear it's the biggest theater open in Munich in 100 years. And yes, the capacity was full. I think it was at least 1,500 people. It's the biggest event for XPeng this year, bigger than the Beijing Auto Show, the biggest product launch in the history of XPeng. Because of the current landscape, the industry, the global industry, what's happening in China, the competition, the evolution, and we're in the heart of the European auto industry.
You're in BMW's backyard. Welcome to the Munich and Detroit edition of China EVs More. In the next hour or so, my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you to do. A Guten Tag, Lei. Can you please introduce yourself?
And good afternoon, too. This is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and coming to you live from Munich.
Did you miss me? Should I have come?
You should have come. I don't even know where to begin because we always say at the top of the show, the news coming out of the global EV, AV mobility sector. This felt like the only event really worth mentioning because of the significance of it being my first ever event attending a Chinese EV brand's global launch outside of China. My first. And I'm actually on China time. So the last few days I've been...
And why?
And the beer, but tonight will be fine. I'm looking forward to finally some cold beer. Because the last few days has been busy and not like really relaxing, just beer and talk about really XPeng. Boy, you missed a lot of things. I wish you were here. I definitely wish you were here. You should have been here.
Oh, man, too many things going on. Honestly,
I know.
I was told, 1,600 guests, 600 media.
So
that just seems like a lot.
So the way the event was held, basically there was a press conference show the night before at a kind of a warehouse. And yesterday the press conference was held at this location called Showpalast, right next to the Allianz Stadium where the FC Bayern Munich plays soccer, football. This is one of the venues. I hear it's the biggest theater open in Munich in 100 years. And yes, the capacity was full. I think it was at least 1,500 people. It's the biggest event for XPeng this year, bigger than the Beijing Auto Show, the biggest product launch in the history of XPeng. Because of the current landscape, the industry, the global industry, what's happening in China, the competition, the evolution, and we're in the heart of the European auto industry.
You're in BMW's backyard.
We're in the BMW group's backyard. So any way you look at it, it's one of those events where it's almost like putting salt on the wound of the German automakers. But He Xiaopeng actually has shown a lot of humility in the press conference, in interviews afterward. One of the things he said, my industry in China were still a student, and Volkswagen is our shareholder. They're on the board and they're teaching us, or they're showing us in terms of management, in terms of their German engineering knowledge. And they want to just, there was interesting in the interview, somebody asked.
Well, let me stop you there. You and I know, because we're Asian, that's giving someone face. Whether or not they deserve it, that's giving Volkswagen face. 给他们面子, right? So I think it's respectful, and that's fine. But I also think that there's some ironies to him saying that, being in Germany, launching this vehicle aimed directly at the mass market Volkswagen branded vehicles. So
yeah, so
just double-edged sword.
Just to give you an idea, I kind of call it the half Model Y or the half U7, but the competitors that XPeng showed is basically the Volkswagen ID.4, the Skoda Elrock, and the BYD Atto 3. That's their official comparison models. But the MONA L03, it's definitely smaller than the Model Y. It's smaller than the G6. I think the pricing is one of the things that stood out to me, because at the press conference, the pricing was announced for the Germany market and also 7 other European markets. And on the live stream, they actually added a component of the China price announcement, which was not shown live at the event. And I actually didn't see it until later in the evening. I was expecting the price to fall into the 130,000. Well, guess what? They launched the Plus version at 123,800 RMB, $18,000. Now, granted, that's the one that does not have the Touring chip. Only the Max and the Ultra SE versions has it. But here you have a discrepancy of pricing. 18,000 starting price in China. German starting price, 35,600 euros. It's double. But from what I'm hearing, that 35,000 euro from some of the media is a good point for this type of vehicle, with the pending approval of the VLA, which they have to meet this DCAS regulation that's going into effect at the end of this year. One of the significance is that this model should become, well, XPeng claims to be the first Chinese OEM to offer advanced highway urban assisted driving outside of China in Europe once they get approval for this new rule, which is a United Nations rule, which means you don't have to go into individual countries for approvals. Once you get this approval, you can start using this NGP, VLA 2.0 in Europe. So that's something that we can look forward to perhaps in Q1 of 2027.
With those only with the Touring trip being able to use NGP.
Right. So yeah, also important to mention, only the Ultra version will have this, so which is the top version, which has 3 Touring chips, 2 for the smart driving and 1 for the smart cockpit.
One thing that stood out to me, that I'd mentioned this since kind of day one, is that XPeng is using Google Maps as its global partner outside of China for its intelligent driving and its GPS. So this is part of that bifurcation where they're going to have a stack for China and they're going to have a stack for the rest of the world. This also helps them take a large step towards entering the U.S. market.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Attention entrepreneurs. Anthony and Luca's Pizza Kitchen is now franchising across the United States. Anthony and Luca's concept revolves around serving the best quality New York pizza, Jersey boardwalk-style pizza, and killer cheesesteaks. They have their dough made in New York and their rolls flown in from Philadelphia, making them the most authentic in their sector. Average unit volume is off the charts, with one unit breaking 90K in monthly sales out of a tiny 1,000 square foot location. If you are interested in learning more about being part of the best in the business concerning pizza, cheesesteaks, panzerotti, and Italian street food, check them out at www.anthonyandlucaspizza.com or email franchise@anthonyandlucaspizza.com.
Yes, because again, that UN regulation is a global regulation. So theoretically, the capabilities of the VLA 2.0 is actually same everywhere in the world. But in Europe, you have to meet this UN regulations, DCAS, which has a requirement on safety, has a requirement on data security, privacy, stuff like that. And the Google Maps, remember, XPeng is notorious for the first one to offer high-def map in the early days. Also the first one to take out the high-def maps. They're the first one to offer LiDAR on the P5. Who still remember the P5? And they're the first one to take out LiDAR to become vision-based. This Google map integration, basically, they don't need that for the autonomous driving, but it's required for the local European consumer habits of points of interest, kind of a supporting the VLA and NGP, but it's not required, but it's critical. That's what He Xiaopeng says in Europe for Europe.
So I don't know too much about these UN requirements, but I think it's still going to be a country by country. Maybe not so much in the EU, but in the United States for sure. If and when the Chinese do come to U.S. roads, there's going to be additional requirements outside of these UN requirements. If the U.S. decides they want to use the UN requirements, if at all.
Yeah. And the jarring thing is, in the past, when I was at China Review, I used to attend these events from the German premiums. They would invite media from China to come to Germany, to come to Europe for these tech events. And now it's the Chinese brands inviting global media to Europe outside of China. I have these flashbacks, right? How the tides have changed, you mentioned at the beginning of the show. And in the backyard, under the backdrop of German automakers, horrendous sales, not only in China, but globally.
Shameless plug, Joe White and I, who is a retired Reuters and Wall Street Journal journalist, he and I did a deep dive because I wanted to ask him he had written a book about GM's failures in the 80s, and I wanted to compare and contrast what's going on with Volkswagen with what happened with General Motors. So for those interested in understanding and deep diving a little bit more on the Volkswagen thing, we did a show this week. This has to be pretty bittersweet. The specs that stand out to me, and in quickly summarizing them, is it's 40,000 euros, Chabo Duo starting in Europe. It's 20,000 starting in China. It's already being compared price-wise to the Model Y, so it's 10,000 euro less expensive than the Model Y. But to your point, it's a smaller vehicle than the Model Y. We knew the Model Y was going to be overpriced. It's already overpriced in Europe just because there's nothing new coming out of it. And now that XPeng has kicked this door open, you're going to really see BYD get more aggressive, because this is the same week or the week after Stella Li reaffirmed Wang Chuanfu's kind of goal of being the number one automaker. Now, Stella Li had said within 5 years. Wang Chuanfu said by 2030. Mm-hmm. And in the newsletter, I kind of articulated out what it would take to get to 10.5 million units. And this is not going to help. Vehicle launches like this at 40,000 euro is not going to help. One thing that, before I give it back to you, Lei, that is a little bit confusing to me right now that I'm not clear on.
Mm-hmm.
The BEV and EREV in China starts at the same price for this L03. There's a branding thing that's different from China and the rest of the world. It's an XPeng L03. In China, it's an XPeng MONA L03. And then currently, although that could be changing, there's a tariff on BEVs, but not EREVs and PHEVs. And so do they eat that additional tariff on the BEV to keep pricing the same? Or how does that adjust for the European market?
So actually, the EREVs are priced slightly higher than the BEVs in Europe. And they're only offering the EREVs, I think in the 7 countries listed were Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, Austria, Norway. Actually, Norway, the starting price is 27,000 euros equivalent. So actually, there's a kind of a gap depending on the country.
So logic would tell you that the BEV should be more expensive because there's a tariff on the BEV,
Right.
but they've priced it cheaper. The other thing that stood out to me, Lei, is that like BYD, they're going to invest in charging infrastructure because it's a C BEV. So it has charging speed of 3C.
Yeah, so also important to stress, this is a 400-volt platform, which is by design, because it charges 10% to 80% in 20 minutes. And something that He Xiaopeng said was interesting, the charging part of it. They want to build 4,000 stations by 2028. Something he said in an interview is that he believes the future will be autonomous charging. They want to do that. And I think it's almost like matching maybe what NIO's battery swapping is able to accomplish, doing things automatically. And then they also talked about megawatt charging, the next generation with the energy storage next to it. Back to the humility part of He Xiaopeng, right? He spoke entirely in his Hubei accent English. The night before, he said something that we want to be in Europe, and it's a 10-year, 20-year journey. So he understands, right? I've been here 3 days. You count the number of EVs on the roads from China, the Chinese EV brands. Certainly a lot of BYDs, some Leap Motors, MGs, XPengs here and there. A lot of BMW iX3s. This is BMW country.
Those are company cars.
Yeah. Same as you see a lot of NIOs in Shanghai, right? So there's that regional discrepancy. But anyhow, this event, the biggest event being that this model has the potential to become the next biggest volume driver for XPeng. And can it replicate the success of the MONA M03? The market environment is different than 2 years ago, but it's
the market is different too.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. The market is different. We're talking about Europe versus China. So,
but the expectation is being an SUV, being that it's launching in 65 markets this year. China
it's
pricing
more of a crossover than an SUV.
Yeah,
like
coupe.
Model Y is more of a crossover.
They call it the AI SUV coupe. The price point it's at in China, it got 48 within the first hour. And of all the XPeng models launched previously, this one has received the most orders in the same amount of time. The potential is there to be a blockbuster. And the event I could think about is, so huge that I don't know how much they spent, the budget that they spent on this, global media, separate events at separate locations, renting out studios for static filming.
The really important thing is that this is precedent setting, as you'd mentioned, and that raises the stakes for Chinese companies for the Paris Motor Show. And I'm talking to you directly, Li Auto, because you will be showing off your vehicle for the first time to European markets. So you have a floor now.
Well,
I'm not saying that you need to rent out all these different places, but if you're going to go into Europe with a whisper, your voice will be drowned out by other Chinese automakers.
Yeah, and it's only a sign of things to come for Chinese EV brands. Expect Xiaomi to hold similar event, if not bigger.
I will go to that
within a year's time. within a year's time.
I will go to that one.
Yeah.
The
auto
one thing
certainly-
that I question a little bit is that XPeng had this massive event, and I just don't know. It's kind of a flood the zone mentality. The China mentality into Europe, I don't know how that's going to work. Is because there's a law of diminishing returns, and you still need to position this vehicle. You still need to build trust. You still need to create awareness. The price point certainly makes it more attractive than others, but at 40,000 euro, it's not cheap. It's not $20,000 cheap. So
hence
there
humility.
will be competitors. So there will be competitors in 65 countries, but there's probably 5 or 6 that matter from a volume standpoint. And
well, China being
it's
one.
still right,
Still.
exactly. And so if sales stall in China, it creates even more pressure for it to be successful outside of China. And we know that, I don't know how you define success, but if you're in the top, once you launch for the 6 months or 7 months, you're doing pretty well.
So numbers. MONA M03 sold 280,000 in less than 2 years. If L03 does that, I will call that a success. If it doesn't, probably not. That's how much expectations.
Well, that would mean, Lei, that probably about half of XPeng's capacity is taken up by 2 cars. Or the M03 sales have dropped, but let's say they have 1 million units of capacity, and I'm guessing. So at 250, and you're talking over 2 years, but let's assume because this is an international launch that there's going to be some incremental sales that matter for the L03. Is it L03 or L03?
But, the other number is MONA M03 averaged 13,000 units a month. Supposedly, the L03 should do as much, being an SUV, being a crossover.
Yeah, I think it'll do maybe 1.3, 1.4 to 1 ratio. So for every 1 M03 is sold, 1.4 L03s are sold. So we put that into a spreadsheet.
Look at these numbers by the time the Munich Auto Show comes around in about a year's time of how the L03 has done. Then we can make a verdict. But now the potential, the expectations are through the roof for this model.
It's very well appointed for 40,000 euros. So it is definitely going to create a much more value proposition for European buyers. And the fact that 2 companies are announcing that they're investing so heavily into charging infrastructure into Europe, it shouldn't be lost on Americans. Because do we want to rely on the government to help with charging infrastructure? Maybe we just invite BYD and XPeng in as long as they pay for charging infrastructure.
And remember, XPeng does not stop here. So the L03 is a suitable market, a compact crossover SUV, right? The ID.4 size, perfect for European urban city streets. But there's even a smaller SUV crossover coming soon. And all of these next models coming online, the G9L, sent you a photo of the G9L, is something, I don't know if it's the right vehicle for the European markets, but they're preparing.
One thing I'll point out as well, Lei, is that XPeng uses their comms team to do marketing. I really think they should separate that out, because marketing is more about branding, more about promotion, more about creating awareness. Communications teams, and you and I have some pretty good contacts at XPeng on the communication side. They're overworked. We know that. Our friend, I was told, was not there.
Mm-hmm.
She did not make the trip. So I'm sure there was even a bit more of like craziness going on because she wasn't able to join. But I really do think part of being mature means that we separate certain functions out, because 65 countries, Lei, 65 countries, and let's say 20 of those countries are in Europe. Okay, or let's say 20-ish countries are in Europe. Different languages, different customs, different charging infrastructure. So communications teams aren't equipped to really communicate messaging that way. That's a marketing function. And so
but
social media doesn't work like it does in China, in Europe, especially in the southern countries. So
but
that would be kind of my advice to XPeng.
Yeah, but overall, I think the event from, landing to all the different activities was done as good as any company, as large as met like this, right? The dinner, the press conference, the earlier this afternoon, as you know, Claudio and I was in the MONA L03 trying out the VLA 2.0, trying out the NGP on the streets of Munich. And
what kind of car was it?
The MONA L03.
Okay.
With the three touring trips, the Ultra SE version.
Was it regular plates or was it
yes
manufacturing plates?
No camels, regular, just the cars they brought. They must have, I heard that they shipped over, I don't know, must have been a few dozen of these cars to show obviously at the event.
They're probably going to ship them to other markets after this week.
We're close to getting that point where the autonomous driving side of things will again pick up speed in terms of what you're offering in China, what Tesla is offering FSD-wise in the US. They may be converging on in this European sector, European region, which is a neutral zone, because Chinese, they cannot get over to the US, and FSD is still waiting to get approval in China. But Europe could potentially be the battleground for the capabilities of FSD, of these smart driving solutions, once that DCAS comes online. And it's an important component of a selling point for XPeng. So much is at stake, basically, what I'm saying.
And the other thing that might be interesting to the robotics and humanoids followers is that XPeng will be selling iron in retail stores next year. So they're continuing to push forward on the robotic side as well. My guess would be within the next 12, 14 months, we'll see more Volkswagens with the Touring chip, maybe even in Europe. You never know.
Yeah, certainly. Also, speaking of Volkswagen, He Xiaopeng did say that they're exploring a lot of things on the table, including finding new ways of cooperating with Volkswagen. What he means by that is possibly this item on the table being producing XPengs at one of the idle plants for Volkswagen.
Well,
because he did say on the record, in addition to Magna and Austria, they're looking at regions around Germany for potential manufacturing sites.
Well, let's take that a step further. Will Volkswagen use XNGP in Europe? If they're using the Turing chip, and XPeng is pushing that, I'm certain. Hey, package deal. We'll give you Turing chips and the software.
XPeng also did mention software licensing in European region.
So I'm going to press rewind a little bit because at the beginning of the show, you talked about how unprecedented this press conference is. But we got to give the OGs credit. Stella Li has been working overtime. When I was at the FT conference, she was there. She's been to France for the launch of BYD vehicles there. She was just at Goodwood launching the Denza Z. So she's pounding the pavement as well. So we should point out that BYD has really been setting the standard. XPeng just raised it. I want to make sure that people do know that BYD is out there and putting their number one person out there, because she's a woman, number one. So it's not like this old white guy kind of thing or man thing. So that's going to be disarming for a lot of people. But that doesn't change the fact that she is always on. She was always on. She's always got her foot on the gas, staying aggressive, being aggressive. She's effectively Wang Chuanfu's mouthpiece for the rest of the world and
Yes.
BYD's mouthpiece. And I want to acknowledge that and recognize that. And there's going to be some fireworks in Paris for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So,
I
because
call it the
Huawei will be there.
Paris Chinese Motor Show.
Yeah. And then, so I'll be in Munich in late September. I'll catch up with some friends. Hopefully, maybe I'll get to borrow an L03 or an L03 XPeng for a couple of days. Anyways, I really quickly, and I have to run, but I really quickly
I know you have to run. And I mean, this week for me, it's almost like once in a while that I kind of force myself to not pay attention to what's happening elsewhere and just focus on XPeng. Just relieve myself of trying to like follow everything. Because on the date of the launch, 7 other models launched.
Yes. Well, Li Auto launched the
L6, yeah. There's the new IM. There's a Wuling. There's some other ones. I don't even remember.
And we got the video for the L9. And then, of course, Germany or European press are drinking through a fire hose because Volkswagen, the aftershocks of Volkswagen's board meeting and the rejection of Bluma's proposal for restructuring is reverberating through the automotive industry. Bill Ford was in Washington, D.C., and he said eventually, we're going to have to compete and beat the Chinese, which is important that such an important person in the U.S. auto industry has acknowledged, look, we can cry over spilt milk or we can roll our sleeves up and get to work. You and I as Americans, we know how good the products are in China. And we can bitch and moan all we want, but at the end of the day, even if they're not in the U.S. market, you're going to have to compete with them outside of it. So
Dongfeng just had an event with the Voya and the Nami in Canada yesterday. He Xiaopeng, again, Claudio asked a question about Canada. Alex Tong, their head of overseas, did in fact say the Canadian and the U.S. are their strategic markets. And the discussions are ongoing for Canada. Let's be real, right? So Bill Ford is one of those people that is real. And do not be naive that this door is going to be closed forever. It's not. It cannot. It will not.
It's just getting interesting. Because, and you see these articles pop up now, Lei. Oh, the US EV sector is dead. Oh, this or oh that. I'm going to do this. I don't want to pull a muscle, but you and I should pat ourselves on the back. We've been here since day one, man. We've been here since day one talking about this stuff.
But again, I think really lucky being able to attend some of these events anywhere in the world. In China, in Europe, hopefully soon enough in the US. And just to, whenever you attend events, you learn more about the companies and get a better understanding.
I don't know if you got a chance to read that post about the Volkswagen in my newsletter, but what did you think? So the premise of my post was they're at 4.6 million units. Let's say there's around 70 million passenger vehicles sold last year. The U.S. had, say, 15 million of that. Okay, so if we take out 15 million, because Stella Lee said we can get to this number, and it's going to be a moving target for BYD because today it's 10.5 million to make you the number one automaker. Maybe it's less, maybe it's more by 2030, but my bet is on Toyota or BYD having to overtake Toyota to be number one. I don't think that's going to change because Volkswagen was the closest.
I did see basically that path you mentioned in the newsletter, the path getting narrower, but Volkswagen is something, right? The cut to 9 million capacity, they're probably going to do 8.5 this year based on the first half numbers, based on the bottom is still not there in the Chinese market. And so what I had said,
what I had said was at 4.6 with 15 million units taken out. So that makes the global market 70 million, 55 million. So without calculation, 4.6 is around 8% of global market share that currently BYD has. In order to get to 10.5, they need to have 20%. If we continue to take out that 15 million units, and 10.5 million units being the number that they need to sell 10.5 million and one vehicle to beat Toyota. And so I don't doubt that Stella and Wang Chuanfu believe in their hearts that they can be number one without the U.S. market. I just think that's really, 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 and to your point, what I'd mentioned, without the U.S. market, the path narrows. And that means the Japan market, the Australia market, the India market BYD needs to own 25 to 30% share in those larger markets in the next 18 to 20 months. But then if sales wasn't the biggest hurdle, I assume that they have around 7 million units of capacity, 6 million units of capacity coming either currently or coming online, 7 million units. So I said, if they need to get to that 10.5 million, that means if I'm assuming 250,000 units, they need 13 factories.
So there's two pathways I think that potentially could happen is the BYDs and the Chinese catching up to the top tier automotive groups much faster than expected. The other pathway is somehow these foreign automakers, they find their mojo, at least in the EV game, and regain some ground globally. But I think the way that it's been happening, things always exceed expectations. Who would have thought at the beginning of this year that domestic sales would be down that much in China?
It's not a great sign.
Right. So we talk about both good and the bad. We must talk about the bad.
Here's the thing. It's one thing in a growing market if BYD sales flatten, that means competitors are out competing them for customers. But in a market that's actually shrinking, there's a chance everybody loses. There's a good chance everybody loses.
So the interesting thing in the back of our mind, the China's goal of having 30% NEVs on the roads by 2030 and the goal of driving retail sales of consumer goods to 60 trillion RMB by 2030. Now, that's the overarching goal. How do you get there? There has to be things happening that help you get there. And the auto industry is a major part of consumption of the economy.
Well, there's two things going on with the automotive, and this is the same thing in Germany and the United States. Is if companies are producing cars, that means people are working. And if people are working, they have to spend their money. And so it's a virtuous cycle. But what's going on now is kind of the opposite. The market is shrinking. That means eventually less people will be working if it stays that way. And that means less consumption and effectively less confidence if you're a Chinese consumer because you're worried about being able to keep your job.
I know you got to run. There's certainly too much to talk about, but we slice and dice. I don't know if you want to
look, Lei, if there are any questions
comments
or anything. So Tom H has been very active. So Tom, thanks for participating. Absent a change in administration, the U.S. will be closed to China OEMs. Eventually, U.S. consumers will demand access to world-class EVs. We couldn't agree more. So yeah, everyone, we get a bit more people in participation when we're a little bit later in the day than 9 a.m. So maybe we got to change that time. I know Felix doesn't like later in the day, but
he's probably having a beer somewhere.
Yeah, we have to do what's good for the masses, for everyone. Anyways, we'll have to think about this. Maybe we move to like a 12 or a 1 p.m. time frame to see if that's better for everyone.
But remember, when I'm in China, it's going to be tough.
Well,
No, I
it's
don't
only
mind
enough for
even-
another couple of weeks. It's only for another
Yeah.
few weeks, right?
I don't mind doing it at midnight China time, even
Okay.
if that has to be done. I mean, fine, be it.
Well, you're only doing it for
I-
another 3 weeks, right? 3 or 4
Yeah,
weeks.
yeah.
Everyone, as always, have a good weekend. We will talk with you next week. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Guten Abend, auf Wiedersehen. My bad German.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at Lei Xing 77. That's LEIXING 77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China EVs and more.